influenced by the maternal environment, which is directly connected to the external environment. And in these early stages, there's very little margin for disruption. Subtle shifts in oxygenation, inflammation, and toxic burden may not always be immediately visible, but they can influence the outcomes across a lifetime. And then we move into infancy, where respiratory, immune, and neurological systems are still developing until they're 25 and remain highly sensitive. So when we discuss environmental exposures, whatever their source, we are also discussing their potential impact on the most vulnerable stages of human life in our next generations. At a health freedom conference, this raises a deeper question. Health freedom is often framed in terms of personal choice, what we eat, how we live, and what we choose for our own bodies. But the other dimension to it is the developing child does not choose its own environment, doesn't have a choice. And so we might ask, what does health freedom mean at the very beginning of life? Does it include the right to develop a clean, stable, supportive environment, ending something as fundamental as the air we breathe? So we have our first other panelist, Nikki Florio. She brings a research-driven perspective on environmental exposure and its biological impact. She has spent a significant amount of time examining patterns that are often overlooked, connecting environmental factors with shifts in human health at a systemic level. Her work focuses on identifying trends, asking deeper questions, and helping bridge the gap between what is being observed and what is being broadly acknowledged in conventional health discussions. And on the other side of the panel, we have Tom Renz. He's an attorney known for his work in public health litigation, where he has taken on the complex cases involving questions of transparency, regulatory oversight, and institutional accountability. His legal efforts are focused on examining how data is used, how decisions are being made, and where legal thresholds exist when it comes to large-scale health and environmental concerns. He brings a practical understanding of what it takes to move from concern to legal action. And we're going to start with Nikki. And I'd like to ask her how she first came to understand geoengineering.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I was a really lucky kid. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, so I played outside all the time. I was very lucky also to travel, so I got to go from the mountains to the coastline. We would fly to Colorado and Chicago, and I was lucky to go up and down in plains and see beautiful blue skies and brilliant white clouds. Spent my life also as an athlete, so I was a swimmer, and as you know, part of swimming is backstroke, so I was looking at the sky all the time, and I grew up, a really very lucky life. When I was about 21, I ended up moving out to Lake Tahoe, and I hadn't gone to college. After high school, I just kind of took some time off, and then I really loved photography, so I started taking outdoor photography classes. So I learned about the micro and macro environment, and I loved it, and I was on my way to a fine arts degree, and in the very last quarter, I had to take a science, and I thought I'll just take anatomy and physiology because it's, pretty easy. My father's a physician, my mother's a nurse, things that kind of paralleled what I did, and I thought it was going to be an easy class. But I was at a small college, and they only offered it every other quarter, so I ended up having to take another science, and the only other science left in my time slot was geology, and I didn't know what it was. So I was up in administration, and I said, "What's geology?" And everyone's looking at each other, and they go, "I think you learned about rocks." And I was like, "What the heck? I don't want to learn about rocks." But I ended up going into the class, and the very first day, I had such an extraordinary instructor, I fell in love with it. So I changed my major to natural sciences, went through the whole thing, geology, geography, meteorology, flora, fauna, blah, blah, blah. And when I was done there, I took another year off and then went to a different college for a humanities degree with a focus on environmental psychology, which is not simply perception of the environment, but also how our brain and physiology and actions are affected by that. And so what we see, what we smell, what we hear, what we feel, there's a different energy inside buildings, and there's a different energy outside buildings in nature, and different stressors that can add to that, and things that make us comfortable. There's also the psychology of color. How does color affect our brains? So in all of those things, I was still playing and working outside. Finally finally went back to school because I thought I wanted to be in education. And I went through an elementary education program to be a certified teacher in California and Nevada, because I was in Lake Tahoe. And I ended up designing an integrated environmental education program called Tahoe Regional Environmental Education, where we did teach about natural sciences, but we had a full conscious consumer program. How does what we eat, what we wear, what we buy, what we drive, how we choose to recreate, how does that have an effect on the environment? And that's when I really started looking at the foods we eat. So I learned about, this way back then, learned about GMOs and what was considered organic biodynamic agriculture and things back then, along with all these other things. Kind of fast forward to 2009, I was outside doing a project, and it was wintertime, the middle of winter, and we had thunder snow. We had a thunder snow event, and there was no collision of systems. And I thought, that's weird. And then we started having all these other weather anomalies. And, okay, that's it. Thank you. Oh. So that kind of led up to me learning about geoengineering. And so I'm going to show you just some basic things about what is occurring with the environment, and kind of an introduction that will give you a better understanding for when Tom discusses his topics, the legal topics. How many of you are already familiar with geoengineering? How many of you know the actual definition of geoengineering? A few of you? Okay. So for those of you who don't, the scientific definition is deliberate large-scale intervention in Earth's natural... The actual definition is deliberate large-scale intervention in Earth's natural systems to counteract climate change. But that's only the scientific definition, and you'll find that at Oxford, Stanford, Harvard, any of the universities that present on geoengineering issues. And unfortunately, when they say intervention of Earth's natural systems, it's not limited to weather. It's all of Earth's systems, the entire hydrologic cycle, and including weaponized nature, everything from earthquakes, inducing earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tidal waves, which is generally done through an earthquake, a non-nuclear based nuclear reaction, and things like this. And there's a scope of technology. This is a really long, and I'm only going to highlight some of them so that Tom has time to talk. So I'm going to go to these little minis over on the side. Most people don't realize that we've been indoctrinated since we were kids, especially if you're older, to think that all these issues with weather have to do with carbon dioxide and climate change. The term has changed from greenhouse effect in the 70s and 80s to global warming in the 90s, when they were inducing more droughts and things like that, to climate change, because today we have wind events, fire events, drought, deluge, freezing events, and more. Now, geoengineering is very specific. Climate engineering is the sector of geoengineering that deals with the climate, not the other weaponized aspects of it. And then global dimming is a term or a part of two of the main technologies in geoengineering. So there's primary objectives. We'll focus on this little section for a minute. So there's the science foundations who claim they're going to help the planet, and then military uses and commercial. And the commercial uses are very public in all the countries except for, guess where? The U.S. So these are just a handful of the institutions that are working on projects. So these are two examples. In the science foundations, the two areas that are covered generally are solar radiation management, or blocking sunlight, and carbon dioxide removal. And the abbreviations are SRM and CDR. And there's other abbreviations in terms like solar radiation mitigation and blah, blah, blah. But it's basically blocking sunlight or capturing carbon. So we will focus just on Stanford for right now. So one of their studies covers the effectiveness. How effective is the technology or project versus affordability and safety? Now, the green means it's very safe. So for the carbon industry, carbon capture and storage is fairly effective and fairly effective and fairly safe. But you get up here to stratospheric aerosols, it's extremely affordable. We already have all the infrastructure. We have the rockets. We have the planes that are very simply modified. And we have ships going across the oceans for ship tracking. But it's not safe for several reasons to block sunlight. One is you're either using a chemical or a biologic agent, including everything from the materials in the Welsbach patent, which is aluminum, barium, strontium, and a host of other materials, to different genetically engineered bacteria, and to CDDs, the cross-domain bacteria, also filaments. The U.S. military uses a product called chaff, which they're very open about as well. Anyway, blocking sunlight, everything on Earth, I'm not talking about the deepest areas of the ocean, but everything on Earth depends on sunlight. Plants don't photosynthesize as well when you block sunlight. It also impacts migratory animals and insects and things like that. But the afforestation, which is planting trees, is very cheap, extremely cheap. But it takes 30 years for a forest to grow, and we just don't have that time. Now, when you look at universities like Stanford and Oxford, they're not talking about planting conventional forests or conventional genetically engineered crops that will grow in conjunction with a genetically modified atmosphere or genetically engineered atmosphere. So if you look over on the Oxford side, when it comes to plants, the foresting section, so this is how well they cool versus readiness versus cost. And this is an old JPEG on the right. But they're talking about genetically engineered forests and crops like the tens of thousands of acres in Florida and California and other states that are already in place. And there are organizations and corporations that are producing crops that will grow in aluminum, in soils that have a lot of aluminum in them. And aluminum is obviously a big problem in geoengineering. But it doesn't account for a lot of the other things occurring. So I'm going through this really fast. There is a massive funding web, and on Sunday we're doing a separate event that's conjoined with NHF, and if you want to know about that, it will cover this stuff deeper, and you can visit our booth. But the biggest projects and the most intense projects are going through the military, and it's very complex. The pharmaceutical and the pharmaceutical, the whole complex between big pharma, agrochemical, 5G, and geoengineering, it's all connected. So this is a pretty important document. It was highlighted a lot last year because it was 2025. It's Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. It's a very short document to read, very easy to read. It was written in 1996, and it covers the scope of technologies utilized and that were already in place by the late or prior to the pandemic. And it just discusses how to degrade enemy forces and help our troops. But in the scope of it, they outline or they lay out all the different technologies and discuss the collective of the technologies that are already in place today for geoengineering, which is all of the aerosol technologies from sounding rockets, ship tracks, the commercial and military airlines and other things, as well as satellites and LEOs, the low Earth orbiting satellites as well. They cover all of this stuff from laser technologies, plasma technologies, ionizers like HARP, the ionosphere heaters, like HARP and ISCAT and all of those things. By 2011, one of the earliest weaponized weather programs was Project Popeye. I'm going to preface this with that. Project Popeye was a rain. It was a dense weather modification. They didn't use the term geoengineering, but it was a weather modification event where they basically rained out the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and so North Korea didn't get supplies anymore. Now they could have used that the first day, but you got to make some money off of war, you know. So the result of that was a treaty called the NMOD, ENMOD treaty. It was basically a treaty designed where you couldn't use geoweapons. And it was an agreement, so there's no international law for it. And even the U.S., even the federal government has documents stating there's easy ways to get around that. Now, in 2011, and then again in 2019, Mohammed Ahmadinejad and I can't remember who was president in 2019. They both accused Europe and the U.S. of not our president. Even though every president we've had since LBJ, they all know about geoengineering. They all know about weather warfare. There's nobody who doesn't know about it. And then commercial weather. This is a huge moneymaker. In weather-dependent industries, the weather-dependent industries are the same industries that are controlling things today. And people think, what's the first thing you think of if you think of a weather-controlled industry? Like agriculture. Yeah, agriculture. But the telecom industry is also highly dependent on weather. And they're not the only ones. You have agrochemical, pharmaceutical, insurance, yes. All the mining companies, all of the energy companies, all of the transportation, from the oceanic transportation to land transportation. And then you have a lot of, the reinsurance is down there. So all of these big industries are now investing in geoengineering. And commercially, you make a lot of money. Now I'm gonna bypass this little section because I probably only have like a minute left, or a minute or so left. But this is just a quick little introduction on how much money you make for one little teeny tiny county, not a whole state or a whole country, of how weather impacts you. This was done by Texas A&M AgriLife Research, and I think TDLR, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, was part of this. Not in on it, but it just happened to be who did it. So for every dollar put into weather modification, the ROI is about $19 directly, with a $38 to $1 ratio for the region. So if you're a community and you want to make a lot of money through agriculture, you're also benefiting the surrounding community if you do weather modification. Geoengineering is not weather modification. This is just another company, a larger company called Weather Modification Incorporated. I only have these countries listed so far, but the largest areas in geoengineering and geoengineering trading for carbon taxes and things like that come from the countries that are doing that. Now, the U.S., Russia, China, and Israel are the top geoengineering countries for geo-warfare, even though China and Russia will still openly discuss weather modification and geoengineering. This particular one is a partnership between India and Canada. So if you look over here, it lists the projects. Right here, it lists the agencies involved, the firms involved. So these are things like afforestation, very innocuous, and then for military, there's military projects as well. And then you have who's working and whether the project is completed or not. Now, if you want more information, I can show you parts or the rest of this presentation after this. Our booth is right outside the door. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And in case you're wondering where our third panelist is, Nicole, she sends her best wishes, but her 2 children got a flu, and she had to stay home with her 6 children. So next, we'll go to Tom Renz.
So we're suing them. That's what we do. First of all, I want to suggest, do talk to Nikki. Nikki's been kind enough and as patient as someone can be with me. I met her a while back, and the amount of knowledge she has is so overwhelming that I got to be honest with you, I can't keep up. If I was smarter, I wouldn't be a lawyer. So you can dig in, and you should dig in her. I've got a lot of respect for her and for a lot of other people that are out there that have been fighting this for years and years and years. I'm a relative noob in this space. It's a phenomenally complex and difficult topic, and I'm not going to pretend that I have anywhere near the knowledge that Nikki has. But when we look at this as a lawyer, we look at this a little bit differently. This isn't academic for us. This is real simple. They're spraying stuff that's making people say, we don't like it, so we're going to sue you. The question is, how do we take the knowledge that people like Nikki have and turn it into something that we can make actionable? And we're working through that, and we actually yesterday, and Nicole, I wish she could have been here, but she's working with me. Her and another person, Blake Horowitz, are working with me on something we've called the Geofight, geofight.com. And this is kind of another initiative. You know, I do the COVID work, I do the MAHA work, I do the anti-corruption work, and we just go wherever we can. And most of this work is unfortunately unfunded, which people like Nikki can attest to. She's been doing this for God knows how long and probably doesn't have a fraction of the funding she deserves. We do everything we can to move the ball forward, but we had a whistleblower. We decided we were going to push into this space. We want to get into the geoengineering space because it's a health issue. And so Blake Horowitz, I met Blake, I don't know, a while back, and he says, Renz, you're one of those activist, crazy lawyers. You know, we need to do something about geoengineering. I said, well, I'll help you to the best of my ability. So we've been working for a while, and we ran across a whistleblower. And we filed a suit yesterday on this. And this is, we just now are talking about it. You know, it's actually very exciting and very big. It's the first step. There is no magic bullet to stop something that's this deep. I want you to understand. We will not stop what's happening tomorrow. And it's unfortunate because it's causing potentially permanent, irreversible damage. Or at least permanent in the sense, I personally believe the world will heal, but not in my lifetime. We know that they're spraying. You don't have to, I don't have to prove to you, if anybody's here is over 40, you probably remember when you looked up at the skies as a kid, you'd see the trail behind the airplane, it would dissipate real quickly. Now there's crisscross trails, zigzag trails, things that spread out in the clouds, and you can literally watch it. So something changed. Right? Something changed. What isn't? And there's a lot. There's a lot, and you know, it's an oversimplification of it, no matter how much time I spend on it, because there's too much to explain in one conversation. But the sulfur, the barium, the strontium, the aluminum, all these things are getting into our atmosphere. New formulations of jet fuel, probably. People intentionally spraying it, probably. All sorts of things. What we're doing right now is we're going through the process of determining what we know, what we know, and what we can prove. We've got enough that we filed a suit. That suit was based on a whistleblower. Justin is a scientist. He is our whistleblower. He's named in the lawsuit, so I can share his name. And he was working with the University of Boulder and Ella, and the allegation, it's a whistleblower lawsuit, a retaliation lawsuit. He came forth and talked about the fact that they were destroying historical weather data and mismanaging it. Why does that matter? That doesn't sound very exciting, does it? Because, I said lawsuit, well, you mean you're suing them over the chemtrails? Bear with me for a second. For the government to take action, there would theoretically need to be some justification, and they're not going to tell you that we're really just doing this because, our donors are making money off of it. We've kind of cooked up this climate change thing, and I'm not saying that there's no climate change, but I'm saying that the way that it's been presented has been dishonest. In 2015, a guy put out a paper that was the basis for the Paris Climate Accords. That guy was involved with the destruction of the records that we're suing over, at least allegedly. Why does this matter? Well, the Paris Climate Accords were many, many billions of dollars of impact globally on the economy, particularly the U.S. And, the grant funding, the tax funding, all these things, they come through because we all believe there's some sort of an emergency that we need to fund this for. Solar radiation management, is it a good idea, is it a bad idea? Well, Nikki can probably comment on that a lot better than I can, but what I can say for sure is if you're spraying aluminum in the air, it's probably not a good idea for humanity. Aluminum is a neurotoxin, for lack of a better term. The nanoparticles can cross the blood-brain barrier. We know that there's inflammation from it. We know there's problems with it. We know that there's potential links to autism and a ton of other things. So do we really want this sprayed in our air? And the answer is clearly no. But we're doing it anyways. Why are we doing it? Well, because we have to stop climate change. It's a global emergency. Well, is it? Well, what's your basis for saying that? Joe Biden declared it a national security issue. That was a very important thing, which, by the way, Nikki mentioned military involvement. From a legal perspective, when Joe Biden made it a national security issue, what that did was that allowed the military to get even more actively involved and do all sorts of new things that they wouldn't have otherwise had the power to do. Now, the military stuff is very hard to uncover because it's all classified in national security. What's a little less difficult to uncover is whistleblowers showing that the basis for a lot of these actions is fraudulent, allegedly. So this guy, this whistleblower, Justin, he was there. He said, "Hey, these records, this historian, by the way, his job was to steward these records, right? And the records are very important and they're complex, and the way that they're kept is complex, and it's necessary because for a true scientist to evaluate these things, they need certain data and certain information, certain knowledge about these records." And if the people who are keeping those records start messing with the paperwork, well, the data becomes useless, right? So Justin saw that they were doing this. He saw that the records that were used as the basis for this whole Paris Climate Accord was garbage, and he talked about it. He was retaliated against, so we're suing. The reason this case is so important is it undermines the justification for a lot of what's happening now. This is step one. It's a critical first step. Right now, we're not going to shut down climate engineering or geoengineering or weather modification or pick your nomenclature. We're not going to shut all that down with one case. This is going to be a series of cases. We're going to have to dig through the bureaucracy, dig through the nuance, and eventually get to where we got to get. But hopefully, discovery and dicta in one case will provide the necessary basis for the next case, and the next case, and the next case. Right. So this is the first. In terms of law, it's not the first time this has been done. When asbestos cases were first filed, there's a lot of asbestos. when tobacco cases were first filed, no, cigarettes aren't, they're fine. It took a series of cases. It took a lot of litigation, a lot of time to demonstrate the changes. So we're looking at this as attorneys in a very methodical, urgent, but methodical way. We need to stop this stuff. I see my man Howard over there. His fields there's stuff falling on him. One of the most natural, organic, regenerative farmers I've ever met. And also, by the way, you should check out his stuff because he's also happens to be probably the most brilliant farmer I've ever ran across. But when we spray this stuff in the skies, it falls to the ground. It falls into our water. It's in our rain. It's everywhere. So we need to stop this, and that's what we're doing. So step one, we're attacking the foundation of it all. Is climate change what they say it is? Is the data real? Is there fraud in the initiative? This is critical because when we looked at COVID, and I learned this from COVID, it's amazing how many parallels are between what they did with COVID, which was one giant fraud, and what they're doing with this whole climate change fraud, which I would say they're very similar in the sense that from beginning to end, there's misrepresentation of data, misrepresentation of science, and it's being used to manipulate things. There's a huge incentive. Nikki touched on this, but I'll take it a little bit further. Talk about the economic incentive. Well, if the return for an agricultural community says $19 on the buck, how about a bigger event? How about an event where you have a flash flood? How about an event where you just, an entire community is destroyed because a hurricane or rains stall? You can think about what I might be alluding to here. We can't prove that that's what happened yet. Give us time. Well, in those cases, an entire area, an entire geographic region can be destroyed. Guess what happens? People with money can come up and buy those resources. Maybe there's natural resources. Maybe the property's valuable, whatever. But you buy it for pennies on the dollar. When those instances occur, and Nikki mentioned fires, and I have hard evidence suggesting that some of the big fires that we've dealt with recently were maybe not as natural or as accidental as they appeared. That's not public. We haven't revealed some. That's not public yet, and I can't make some of the public yet. But these are disasters that make not 19 on the dollar, but many, many. And by the way, if weather modification provides an investment tool, think about this. If you know that a weather event's going to happen, it's going to be a major event. Couldn't you invest on that? What if you were investing on or against, betting on or against insurance? What if you were betting on or against property values? So there's a huge, monumental financial incentive to master weather. And when we talk about Operation Popeye, right, shut down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, it was a militaristic thing. But the damage was concentrated in a specific area. And you think about the economic impact. What if that wasn't a military event? What if it was something that was done as a mechanism by which people could make money? And you may say, well, that seems pretty evil. Who would want to make money off of something that caused that kind of damage to humanity? mRNA, anybody? If you don't, and they are all tied together. As Nikki said, one of the things that's been very surprising to me, my red pill was COVID. Right? So prior to COVID, I was probably pretty mainstream. I thought I was awake, but boy, was I not. And every day since then, it's been a learning curve. I started out with COVID. Well, then I find out that it's not just mRNA vaccines and a little bit of gain of function. I see gain of functions everywhere. I think Judy's in here somewhere. Yeah, there she is. Judy can talk about how widespread and how evil some of the stuff is in pharma better than I can. But you manufacture. I find a gain of function in manufacturing disease, so you can sell the cure. Then I find out, wait a second, it's not just pharma. It's agriculture. What? Agriculture. Well, yeah, our animals are vaccinated. Our fields are poisoned. Our food supply is genetically modified. And guess who owns agriculture? Same people that own farming. Well, then I dig a little further. Not that long ago, I became, a noob in the geoengineering space. Guess who's involved with geoengineering? The same people. There's a core group of people that seem to be manipulating life itself on every level. It sounds conspiracy theory, right? Except that the theory part doesn't need to be there. It's just a conspiracy. We've got the paperwork. We can show you how there's money being made. We just saw in the Epstein files the whole conversation between Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein, how they can make money off of, events like COVID, say, right? If you didn't see that, dig around, it's on the internet. You can see there was that was one thing in the Epstein files that they forgot to scrub. I'm sorry, they were totally transparent, releasing everything, right? Except for the 3.5 billion pages and the tens of thousands of hours of old men raping children. They seem to have forgotten us. But don't worry, there's no Epstein list. Sorry, I'm a little bit skeptical, I'm a little bit jaded at this point. Understand something, that one of the things that I love about NHF, and thank you, Scott Tibbs, thank you to the board of NHF for your ethics. Whatever space I go into, everybody seems to have an agenda. This is one of the few spaces where I can rip on everybody, which is good because I really don't have a lot of faith in anybody. If you're elected at this point, I probably don't trust you. There's a handful of good people, but it's a small handful. Money's being made. Geoengineering is not a conspiracy theory. It's not a theory at all. There's trade associations. Why would you have a geoengineering trade association if it's fake? Why would Stanford, why would Harvard, why would MIT have entire programs designed on teaching people to become geoengineers if it was fake? This is real. They're spraying things, and you know what? You want to know the number one way that I can tell you, number one thing I can say to suggest to you that maybe we need to know more? They don't want us to know.
Yeah.
Just like they told us that I was a conspiracy theorist with masks. Just like they told us we were conspiracy theorists with social distancing. Just like they told us with mRNA. Geoengineering is real. Nikki was ahead of her time. So were a few others. We need to start listening to them. We need to start moving on it. And that's what we're trying to do. So a lot more to come. We're going to keep going, and God willing, we're going to see people held accountable.
And thank you, Scott, for letting us talk about this.
Who are you suing? University of Colorado Boulder and potentially some government agents, some government actors.
Yeah.
Dean Wigington is somebody I've followed for some time, and I don't find him to be the most effective communicator, although I believe his message is relatively accurate and it's very sincere. I just wanted to see what you thought about him and what can be done to, I guess, get this more in the public eye. Because the vaccine issue, like it or not, it's very much in the public eye now. Muhammad, with the food issue, the agriculture issue. But the geoengineering is still kind of out there in left field somewhere. So is Wigington the guy? Is he not? Is there some other way that you can envision of getting this issue more in the public eye?
So, to my mind, Dane, and I've met Dane, he knows an immense amount. For me, I agree with you. The one big issue we've had is communications on this. The problem is Nikki, Dane, all these guys, they've studied this for so many years, they know so much. What we have to do, and what I'm trying to do as an attorney, and when we go into a courtroom, it has to be succinct and it has to be matched up with the cause of action. So we have to be very careful that we don't get information overload on certain things, because if we do, we just kind of run amok. What we have to do is we have to approach this and we have to prove this in small steps. And it's very frustrating when I talk to people who, and I can't stress this enough, I have a lot of respect for these experts. I'm not half the expert they are. My expertise is figuring out how to tell the story. Right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take these bite-sized pieces of information, prove them, make sure that they're in the public eye in an indisputable way, right? So the allegations in that complaint, which is posted on the geoplay.com, the allegations in that complaint are things that we can prove, right? They are on record. If we lie to the court, we lose our license. So you cannot say that we're lying. Actually, we have a protection against the media. Normally in a public issue, they can call you a liar. In this case, if we talk about what's in that complaint and they call us a liar, I can sue for defamation per se, even on a public issue. So that's a critical thing to understand. Not lying to the court. If we're proven wrong, by backbiting, that's one thing, but we're not lying to the court. So what we have to do is we have to, in very bite-sized pieces, bring this to the public, because what they're doing, what the other side is doing, is the same as what they did with COVID, the same as what they've done with vaccines. Oh, you're just lying. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. So what we do is we want to counter that with facts that we can back up in a very concise way. And we have to be careful that when we tell the story, we don't skip from A to C or A to D. We have to go A to B to C to D. And we have to prove each step of the way. We did this. This is exactly what I did during COVID, and I had the great benefit of being a skeptic when I started at COVID, right? One of the good things about me is I wasn't a long-time health freedom guy. So what I did is I shared with the public, and I told the story as I learned. And we're going to do the same thing here. It'll be a long time before I know half of what Nikki knows. But I don't need to know it all. I need to know enough to prove where I'm at and to help bring the public along with that. So what we want to do is we want to educate the public. We want to publicize what we're doing. We want to make sure that people understand. And we know more than what we're saying. I mean, obviously we have a good big picture understanding of what's happening. Not like Nikki, not like Dean, but a solid picture. And we know that we're going to go A to B to C and try to bring this out in a very credible way that people can understand in small bites. So it's about that being honest.
Thank you very much. It's always humbling to be in the presence of those who know so much more about these topics, and I think that's why this organization, this collective, is so important. And I mentioned this last night when I was speaking momentarily about the opportunity that we have here to be able to learn from each other, and each of us likely found our way here because of a personal journey of some kind, or some impactful event with ourselves or a loved one that forced us into the unknown space where we now had to learn. I'm so thankful to get to. I've spoken with Nikki before about the geoengineering topic as a whole, and I said, I'm going to be honest with you, everything you just said is completely over my head. This is an area that I haven't had time to dive into, and there hasn't been, that forced push. One of the spaces for me was the vaccine space. I was formerly the director of marketing for a hospital. That was what I did for a living until all of a sudden skills fell off of my eyes. And sometimes some things happen rather quickly, like a vaccine injury in a child. And we went through that, and that propelled me quite quickly, But other things are just little bits along the way. And being here and getting to learn from all of you, it's so fun to listen to someone like Tom say, I hardly, know anything compared to Nikki or Cece earlier saying, I'm not an expert. They call me an expert. I just have a 12-year head start on everybody else. And, I feel pretty confident in the nutrition space. I don't know of any people here really that are experts, able to be experts in every area, but if there is a candidate for that, I think it would be our next speaker. It's as if you've taken all of the topics, thrown them into one brain, shaken them up, and she's going to be able to deliver a phenomenal presentation. She was Dr. Judy. Come on up, Dr. Judy McNitt is here today. I don't think Judy did a great job running, but I was like, all right, I'm going to go figure out, a little bit more about what we're going to say, because the title I have was vaccines. Like, that's a pretty broad topic. And she basically gave the entire, this and this and this and this, and I'm so excited to be able to learn from you, Dr. Judy. The first time that I was actually privileged to listen to you speak was last year at this same event, and my fingers couldn't move on my keyboard fast enough, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. What she said is she's telling us actionable things that we can take home with us, and so I think she's ready. I think we're ready to rock. I'll bring this back with me. Without further ado, please once again welcome Dr. Judy McNitt.
Okay. It's not going to be fun. We'll make it more fun. So don't take notes and things as fast as you can, because I'll airdrop these to you throughout the weekend. And this is basically a conglomerate of probably about 10 to 15 years worth of talks, maybe more. And I tend to leave the slide the way it was the first time I showed it, so that we could make it a little easier for me to find it on my computer. But I hope to give you the same kind of confidence that Nikki and Tom just did, that the whole idea behind all of this is that we can work together and get this done. So I sit back and listen to Howard and everybody all day long, starting with Matt, and try to pull in things that make sense, so you'll see how basically they're just pulling the wool over your eyes, or whatever your parents used to call it. My mom made me memorize everything. So it's a Cherokee tradition that you never forget. So just bringing that, some of what was just said close to home. Here's a paper thinking about geoengineering on the effects of environmental change on zoonotic disease risk. So if you're thinking about things jumping out of bat caves and into bat caves, out of Cleveland Clinic, and bat poop, and experiments and papers that couldn't be done from the methods that you see how, the fraud in whatever the literature is. The fraud is in the literature. And by the way, science isn't medicine, and never was. The practice of medicine, it's an art form, and Thomas Jefferson is our scientist and our founding fathers, and Benjamin Rush is our physician. So if you see here, this just draws on what Howard was telling us this morning. Every author on this paper, this is Trends in Parasitology, April 2014. Takes a while to get it published, so you're always looking at who the authors are, when it was submitted, when it was accepted, and then when they let it go out to the public, because that really matters. And so all of these authors, if you go look them up, ended up getting $1 zillion in climate change research. But every one of these asterisks at the end of, and this is exactly what Howard said this morning about, it's the metabolic. It's when at any time you genetically modify anything, the plants, the uncontrollable is number one, uncontrollable effects. You can't tell what's going to happen when you do that. And one of number two is you create a metabolite to a toxic level. So it's a normal metabolite that ends up in a toxic level in that food. And then all the way down to number three is the effect of the GM, the genetically modified insert, on the stability of things, on how easy it is to change or create new recombinants. So these things are creating new nanobots as you go along. And that's a good way to say it. And all the way at the bottom, number 4, is the toxicity, of herbicide, of herbicide-ready crops. And what Howard said was most important. It's all about the soil. It's all about the terrain. So I flipped through last year's talk a little bit and show you in the vaccine excipient list. So this is your vaccine excipient summary, and I'm showing you the ones from 2001, 2011, and where they're highlighted there, it's where we served. Mark Inc. is a company, Mikovits and Rossetti Consulting, and most of our work for a decade or close to a decade before they shut it down was opining as experts in vaccine injury court, in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which they also teach to lawyers at George Washington University Law School how to help compensate the victims. And one of my lawyers in helping me out, Michael R. Hugo, actually wrote that compensation program with Barbara Fisher, because Ronald Reagan wasn't a fool when he had the second gun to his head. So he said, fine, I'll remove all liability from pharma, and I'll place it right on Fauci. So you removed it from the manufacturers, and I say Fauci just because there are 2 F's there. I like to say Fauci. At any rate, and by the way, if we don't know the difference between the National Cancer Institute and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, you'll recognize I never worked a single day for Fauci. In fact, he's 50 miles up the road, and every time I saw him, including the last time in 2010, put my finger down and told that fucker got did.
Yeah.
Well, it killed my aunt this time. Anyway, look at the dates on that. 2011, 2011. Everything I'm always going to show you is the dates. Because dates matter, just like in papers, because this is how they're trying to make you think a different narrative. So I'm showing you the various, we would go to the excipient list, that's everything that's in the vaccine or in the formulation that doesn't have anything to do with the antigen. And all you have to do is look at the highlights of viral monkey kidney cells. Oh, you're going to put some monkey mRNA, DNA, and protein, and a lot of it. You're going to put polyethylene glycol, you're going to put formaldehyde. That'll just freeze things so that any given time you can bring in a glutaraldehyde, anti-freeze. Oh, so it doesn't freeze, so we've got it in the freezers in little vials, and all I have to do is drop that in fermentation, 250-liter fermenter at Fort Detrick, which is where all this work was done. How they did when they put the Cancer Institute in there in 1970s with Nixon was just turn the sign around on the USAMRIID Military Research Institute, and you're just killing everybody. So last year I showed this in the panel, and sorry I didn't get those eye covers over it, but this is a couple of the cases we did in vaccine court to show the death, the leukemia, the psychosis, cardiac arrest, autoimmune disease, alopecia, losing your hair. These are different, except for the little girl on this side of the. She'd have a green laser for us, folks. That little girl was an athlete in Manhattan Beach on her way to Stanford. She never made it. She got a DTaP shot, not Gardasil. It was DTaP, but I covered it up to protect the innocent, these kids. And I actually sent that to Michael R. Hugo and said, hey, in 2015, I said, hey, how about contagious? How about an AIDS patient? He said, she got HIV. I said, no, DTaP, but they're one and the same thing, as we now appreciate. And we'll show you the fabulous Antoinette Gotti and her husband, Stefan. He has a different last name. 2017 published these neo-contamination article, which we used in vaccine for. These are some of the aggregates and things. Does it bring to mind things Carrie Madej is telling you? Does it bring to mind these, look, there's whole red blood cells in there. And then look at the metals. So what they did was they did scanning electron microscope, gas chromatography, GC, and then mass spec. And one whole red blood cell, that's a whole red blood cell. God only knows from what. Injected into the brain of an infant or a teenager at developmental stages of life. Lauren lost her hair, think about chemotherapy, alopecia, and then the little boy on the bottom, of course, hepatitis B at birth. So Trump, Kennedy have tried very hard to get these things out of there, especially during the important developmental times, so that our kids aren't poisoned by injection from the very beginning. So this was a 2010 paper we wrote, review after we talked about the xenotropic. All xenotropic means is xeno is foreign, and you better believe I'm a xenophobe. Nothing goes into the blood of Jesus Christ in this woman. Ever. Don't ever allow your children to be injected with anything again, ever. Or your animals or your plants. It's totally against God. Well, all you see is that the inflammatory stimuli, and this is AIDS. This is the inflammatory events. The more they give them over time. You know, eventually you get the total XMRVs, anything that's xeno, anything that's foreign. You could call every single thing since 1934 an XMRV. By the way, the first time the murine leukemia viruses were injected was 1934. It's chapter 5 of our first book. The first cases of this in Los Angeles. So wondering why a fire just hit Los Angeles and destroyed. They were still, as Tom just said, they're trying to destroy the evidence. And so now they just changed the name. I added long COVID and neuro AIDS because they called it chronic fatigue syndrome there. I just called it AIDS in the beginning. The envelope antigen is now called the spike. Oh, come on. Sandy Rossetti discovered and proved all you needed to do was inject. It's not a spike protein. It's a spike lipoprotein. It's a lipopolysaccharide shell. Come on, folks. You listen to people who don't have a clue and you don't know why. The course of action used to be the latency of any development of any disease symptom used to be decades, years. And Frank came to me last time he talked to me. It was just before that. He can't. His kids are going to get killed. His only son. Anyway, so I said, Judy, I don't get it. The latency with HTLV1 used to be 3 decades, so less than 1% of the people infected with that naturally, the only naturally occurring back to the 1500s human disease-associated retrovirus used to be about 5% of the people would get multiple sclerosis, and all you had to do was give them a steroid, inhibit that, and they're back out of the wheelchair. Now, within months, these people have multiple sclerosis and the deadly adult T-cell leukemia. So, Dr. A back there, we cured that in Japan as well by very simple steps. Stop breastfeeding after 6 months. Make sure you establish the endocannabinoid system first. Very simple ways to heal this. And now we've essentially eliminated both adult T-cell leukemia and the associated neurological diseases in in Japan and in Brazil as well, where it was a big problem. I just have to show this. I won't read it, but I laugh because God has such a great sense of humor. So there's all of the criminals at your NIH Criminal Center. That's the Mazer Auditorium, by the way, and that's the CDC news in December of 2011. Well, the next day I was supposed to die, November 9th, 2011, and that's where the first chapter of the book, Plague of Corruption, after Bobby's beautiful foreword, is The Scientist at Sea. Just listen to it. Listen to these books. Don't read them. It's funny. And so somebody knocked on our door at 4 in the morning. By the way, my name's not Mikovits, it's Noldy. And it has been since October 7, 2000. Only God. Anyway, because in 1991, 1 million Americans were infected with HIV, which they all got from a hepatitis B vaccine. So just keep hearing me. That's how they got that gain-of-function virus in. Now, they've changed the vaccine since, but it didn't matter. You got it to the gay men, the IV drug users, the prostitutes. You experimented on the people you wanted to experiment on. But wait a minute, Magic Johnson wasn't a gay man. Anyway, it was 4 in the morning, and the house was surrounded. I went upstairs and called Frank Rossetti, and he said, "Young moron, you got a boat, they can't take you out the water, and throw that cell phone down." Okay, Frank. I always listen to Frank. He's pretty smart. Anyway, but of course I'm not a controversial CFS researcher or anything else. All that says there was in the bottom there, that's your science writer for Science Insider. Fraud in the journal Science, #1. Yeah, right. #1 journal in America. So John Cohen, and the last thing it says is there was no warrant, there was no nothing. It could have been from one of the several agency heads. Agency heads are scared to death. ... Agency heads are scared to death if XMRV works out. September 11, 2010, a criminal from the CDC, former Suzanne Vernon, now in an advocacy group, she probably quit that by now since she destroyed the CFS community, or she thought she did. Well, they had to pay for this. They were liable thanks to our friends in ACT UP. And there was no warrant. Somebody in police uniforms tried to take us out of our house. Thank God for Travis Middleton. Oh, great God. If you want to get out of jail free card, hire a black man. Just tell me. Because they do the crime and they get you out of jail. At any rate, so the Queen thought she had checkmate, but King Jesus had another move, and that was of course Mickey Willis, and we won't even talk about the gift that Mickey Willis was to all of us with pandemic when he said, "May the 4th be with us." Well, I'm showing you this paper because I wanted to get as quickly as I can to a solution here. Well, they're telling you right here in this publication that they don't have any idea what and I've taught this for a number of years, this was probably, and used it in vaccine court, what the mechanisms are of vaccination. So they said, here we have a really problem because pathogens that mutate rapidly like HIV and those that exist as multiple serotypes. Oh, that would be about everything. A variant such as dengue virus and any of the herpes viruses, serotypes, they have different antibody responses. I have EBV, yeah, which one? Which variant, which strain? The one that has the spike protein, know anything about how they tether? So if we will stop, if we will think about God's pathways of protections from the poisons, and his providence, then we might get a little further than worrying about the virus du jour, which is no big deal. But they pose formidable immunological challenges. But God knows how to deal with that too. So all we simply did, vaccine AIDS. Don't say the AIDS, don't say anything else. This is vaccine AIDS, whether you vaccinated your plants, your animals, your cows, your pigs, as we saw from Howard, or anything else, was COVID-19. And so autoimmune disease, autoinflammatory disease, no such thing. No such thing as autoimmune disease. The body of Christ doesn't attack itself, and neither does yours. It is non-self. It is a poison to something in your food supply. So experimentation without informed consent is crimes against humanity. So all of these diseases, hey, why don't you just call it Lou Gehrig's disease? And yet we have bucket challenges, yeah, right. That's humane. Just stop injecting them. By the way, that's shingles along with some of the other COVID shots, and you generate the right cytokine storm. God didn't make cytokine storms. He made us fire dancers. He made us fire dancers. That's what our immune systems do. Here's a paper from, just to get quickly into this, New Inflammatory Syndromes, 2015. Sorry, I'll get it back. I'll go really fast. New inflammatory syndromes. Anybody recognize that as COVID? Long COVID, 2015. 2015, they knew they were caught, so they had to do something about it. But this is, remember, they have all the nukes, so we have to have workarounds, as my friend John told you. So most of the reason I'm up here today showing this in the opposite order, I'll give you the confidence with that whatever time I have out, is the medical mafia and the new CDC director are in a boatload of trouble. I mean, that boat is sinking. Why? Because every one of these documents, anything that is an immunization record, see there, they've got these COVID-19 vaccination cards. They've got an immunization record that's a homeopathy. Right in the middle there is your immunization record that on the left here says the state. This is the state of California, which is where I live, and we better take care of that first because it's a state seal. This has to be a card. It has to be a card. And what Trump and Kennedy have gotten to do is when they tried to get these down, MMR is not a vaccine preventable disease. Hepatitis might be, or hepatitis A, B, or C might be, but MMR is not a disease. DTaP is not a disease. So and Bobby tried to take that down too, and they said, the judge said, oh, we can't possibly do that, take those down and just have the vaccine preventable diseases, which would drop it back down to about 8, because the AAP, the pediatricians don't have time, the lobby, they don't have time to educate anybody. No, they can't do this. They can educate you, I can, and I'll show you everything that's in there, and I'll give you a solution. So every one of these cards that are out in California, they're criminally liable. Where's Tom? Is Tom still in here? Yeah, because that's a stamp. You can't have a stamp. You have to have a signature of a human being, and they need the lot numbers. So every one of these is in violation of the compensation program that Michael R. Hugo and Barbara Lowe Fisher, heroes, actually wrote. And so there are a whole lot of these cards that are out there. And so what we're going to do for you today, and you see there that I've put Light Dove Ministries Medical Group on that left, and that would be us. And the buck stops here. That would be all of you in this room, because it's not a medical group. It's MED, it's a medical education group, and I'm giving it to you, and then I'm deputizing you, and I'll give you these cards, or I'll tell you how to order them, and we'll get them. The workaround, remember, they have all the nukes. Let's get out there and protect everybody from the next pandemic. So here is why, and this is Obama. The U.S. repealed the propaganda ban, so everything you see on TV is propaganda. And everything you see in your scientific, your medical literature, science is science. God's laws are God's laws. Well, this is a criminal organization out of Chicago. I think Kamala set it up, but this is the one that President Trump just declared. And they call it CAIR, but the lettering and the coloring, it's not a California immunization record. It's whatever that terrorist organization is in Chicago. And what that piece of paper says there is that you have an online immunization. It didn't say record, it said registry. No. And when you read that form, and again, all of these are available to you, why? Because ACT UP back in the 80s, California Public Health is liable. If you make less than $72,000 a year and you live in California, you don't even have to be a resident. This AIDS drug assistance program, it means you're eligible. Well, every single one of you was injected with HIV because HIV is in every single COVID shot. And so, and every one before that, every flu shot, every polio shot, every shot after 2004 when they made SARS-CoV-2 is in fact HIV, XMRV, and SARS. It never was a coronavirus, folks. And a lot of my friends that are doctors, like beautiful Dr. Urso, you know, when you're trying to treat patients and he's so sick now, I don't even know if he's still alive. But these are the things, they have to pay for that, every bit of it, and it would break the bank. It would break the bank of California. It would break the bank of this country, trillions of dollars. The foreword of our first book, Plague, is a disease able to affect the economies of nations. And that's what this is all about. So what do you do about it? Well, you get a workaround because they have all the nukes. So we're all gonna, I think I have that a little bit towards the end, but what did we do about it? Well, we kept working in this company, 2 companies out of Santa Barbara, California, when I left the NCI in May 11, 2001. My first day at work at Epigenics Pharmaceuticals in Santa Barbara was May 14th. We raised a lot of money in 2001. We built a lab in Carlsbad, California. We protected everything from all of this, and we showed you the pathways, the cells that nourish your cells, what trauma looked like at every molecular level, and how what those various cytokine protection pathways that would turn into poison pathways, because when it's a pseudo-uridine, when it's fake, when it won't break down, then you stay, as Sherry Tenpenny tells us, in macrophage 1, and you're literally just eating your cell completely out. So on the right-hand side is a 2012 paper. I had to take my name off these things because after I got kidnapped and held in that jail, and Science, the journal, threatened that's why that wasn't a mugshot any more than Trump's was. That was to tell the scientists what, if they dared open their mouths, what would happen to them, and it wasn't a lot of fun. But Genius Omnitura is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company harnessing the power of the plants. The patents on those 2 are 2010. So the whole idea of the functional forgery of our patents in pandemic. Well, we kept going anyway because Chinese guys with a spelling problem, Jim Dow and J&J, Jerry Norskog, the current CEO, they killed Jim Dow, by the way, first to die in all of this. This was what we built in front of DARPA, April 6, 2009. A month before we submitted that science paper, we showed DARPA how to protect the military, and this is the pathways, the chronic inflammation associated with inflammation. This is accelerated aging as 10-year-old with triple-negative breast cancer. Give me a break. And you know, and you keep going back to these hospital homicide centers, and I haven't seen not one pathology report in the last 8 years that was anything other than criminal fraud. Anything other than criminal fraud. And you believe that. Thank God that Godspeed Church gave you an office and a place to talk up there so that I could go up there and walk through. I'll spend hours with every single patient, and I make sure no doctors come up yet, but I'm sure they will. This was my PhD thesis in 1991, and I happened to present the updated model at Autism 1 in 2015, and Bobby Kennedy was there. So we know exactly how to target the stem cells and which one with natural products. And I'm just showing you as quickly as I can do this. I can make that go.
That's a great slide.
Make the battery die. Frank Rossetti won the 1992 Distinguished Silver Medal, the highest honor anybody could work at NIH as an intramural employee, for two things. TGF-beta is the master regulator of the hematopoietic stem cell, and the epigenetics. That was my PhD thesis, and we'll look at a little of that. But what this shows you is new knowledge that we gained by understanding. On the right-hand side, your endocannabinoid system, where CB2, the cannabinoid receptor sensors. It's all about the sensors. It's not about the poison, because we can Katie bar the door as quickly as we can. But we see there that if you follow just the TGF-beta blocking areas throughout that slide, the protection that you get before you will get to an adaptive T-cell response. You won't get there. You won't go there. If you're inflamed, you will not heal. You think this threatens an industry that's doing replacement parts? God didn't make replacement parts. You're not making any mesenchymal fluid. You're not making synovial fluid. It looks like bone on bone, but all you have to do is turn back on the faucet and turn down the inflammation. This is Mike Leonardo's work. He was also with us in HIV/AIDS in the NIAID. So it's the dysregulation, homeostasis, balance. It's not disease. It's not over yet, folks. Cation signaling causes acquired immune deficiency or disease, AIDS. So we're just going to rename the NIAID to the National Institute of Acquired Immune Disease. And if Bobby answers me, I'd be happy to take that job and enforce Mike Leonardo. They work for the good guys. Only temporarily, because I don't want to do this. I want to go to the beach and play with the grandkids, as I heard earlier. But it's divalent cation signaling. So we just heard from Nikki and everybody about divalent cation signaling. These are all sensors. Mag-3 comes from the soil. You know, what causes you to endocytose? What are matrix metalloproteinases? You know, zinc transition metals. They're in the soil. The soil's dead. The soil's dead, and we can't get this in the formulations that God gave it to us. So we have to clean up the soil and get some powdered food and do it ourselves. And that's the product. This product was Cardio Miracle, and the paper, when I met John Hewlett, it was a download from God in 2007, because he was dying of appendicitis. Yes, he's a huge guy, and Cardio Miracle's a bad name, especially after this functional paper come out. So here's how we use AI. Pathways, folks. Those two red targets are the deadliest cancer targets. They've tried to drug them for decades. Hey, all you got to do is eat this powdered food, and it's functional. 2004 Botanical Drug Guidance Act. That's how Omnitura patented Anustats. They restored a balance. U restored a neutral. And it's not a thermostat or a rheostat. So of the 10.5 gram scoop, 6.39 is the nitric oxide. No, it's ENOX. It's endothelial nitric oxide synthetase. It rebuilds the entire endothelium. So if you're inflamed anywhere and you'll lose your vision in the small cells in the brain, no such thing as a TIA, mini stroke. What a bunch of fools. Why do you listen to these doctors? Anyway, 9.5 milligrams is this fruit and vegetable phytonutrient blend. One moron told me that they're willfully ignorant, by the way. That's what that means. Ask Rock. Told me that, you have 4,167% the vitamin B12. That's too much. From 300, 900 milligrams. Out of a 10.5 gram scoop, it's just by weight. What's the rest of it that doesn't dissolve? Oh, peptides? Don't inject those things either. You get them from your food. And you might metabolize them. I mean, they had that congressman there telling you last week to Bobby, what are you going to do about peptides? Well, we're not going to let you inject them, asshole. Oops, sorry. He didn't say that way. He didn't say that way. That's why he won't let the crazies join the party, yeah? So you can see that what this powdered recipe does is protein networks. You want to fortify and nutrify your system so that you don't have to worry about which spike protein, and then all you have to do is use Global Healing Foreign Protein Cleanse, and you got it. We just heard about a lot of them. So a foundation, I call it living water from plants. Our soil is dead, and therefore our water is nothing but contaminated. And I just want to throw out my dear friend Rich Ulrey, who his book, Minerals According to the Genetic Code, he put a code together that shows you the barium and all those things I just showed you. Absolutely brilliant. One day we're going to understand each other, but we, like my friend Stephanie said it, but we still have fun. And dimethylglycine from the earth. Methionine is your amino acid from the soil. Methionine from the soil. What feeds your X chromosome? Supplemental, because it's a nutrient. It's a modified amino acid that you get from grasses and other things that your cows metabolize. Worst thing you could be is a vegan. The only place you donate back a methyl group is when you add it to serine in order to make glutathione. Please don't do anything with nattokinase. It's not natto and it's not a kinase. It's a deadly serine protease. Let's see how much money you pay Peter McCullough after this. Anyway, so this is from a paper on your free energy sources and your membrane transports channel. Hey, you buy it, I don't. PH, he wouldn't talk to me. Remember last year when he wouldn't take the stage and he wouldn't show back up on Sunday and he lives 10 minutes down the road? If that's not insulting you, I don't know what is. pH homeostasis, free energy source. It's energy. ATP synthesis, it's energy. Energy, it's your microbes. See the top of that? It's your microbes. It's tryptophan. It's food. You're not getting any food. You're feeding the microbes in your gut. You're not feeding your cells. You're feeding the microbes. Proimmune, radiation poisoning. Proimmune is the second part of a three-part foundational anustat for all vaccines, which the government is going to immediately approve all of these things as anustats because we've held patents for 16 years and developed them. So this is your tricarboxylic acid cycle. Another one of my students here in Genius Omnitura, where I am the chief scientific officer now, shows you pH. Reverse osmosis water, pH is 5. pH is 5. That's cancer, folks. Glucose, glutamine, short-chain fatty acids. That's what feeds everything. Glucose doesn't cause cancer. Glucose ain't fructose, ain't sucralose, ain't sugar. Yeah, and that's why you had to powder the fruits. Please stop eating that stuff they call fruit out there. It's loaded with glyphosate. If it's in Cardio Miracle, don't buy it and use your money on things like tomatoes, where you actually would get up here. NADPH, nicotine, adenine, dinucleotide. Why don't we just call it potential hydrogen? Oh, you mean you make that? Yeah, and they took all the nicotine and I love Ryan Artis, he's so good. And you remake your mRNA. So this is your radiation tool right here. Albert Crumb's 93 or 4 years old, and it's been in the physician's desk reference forever. It is already approved. So that's that. Then Delson, our latest heroes on the scene are right here. Natalie and Greg
so she's
and Dr. Antoine
Delson, the sugar company.
Natalie came to me. She followed me around the country and said, Judy, you have to see this, and her story is amazing as well. And I saw it, and I took one look at the recipe like I did with John, and I said, okay, do the AI, prove it. Prove you hit these pathways, because I very much need these pathways when we're talking about metabolic neuropathies, these pain syndrome, because these are your white blood cells back here. This is the balance between hyperglycemia and hyperlipidemia. Hyperlipidemia, metabolic neuropathy. All roads lead to NF-kappa B, but is it chunk kinase that I-kappa B is holding, or is it other kinases? And this is what a kinase puts phosphate on, and that's why glyphosate is so deadly. So you see the fat metabolism there. Let me just back up one. You see the fat metabolism there. We're dying because our fats aren't real fat. Short chain fatty acid. Please don't live. There's coconut, powdered organic coconut powder in Cardio Miracle. Do not drink triglycerides, medium chain MCT oils. You're all getting stupid because you're trying to decide how to eat. Just eat butter, get grass-fed, grass-finished. Cows, you cannot be a vegan and be healthy. You cannot. You can if you're at group, but hey, he's the one that can get this stuff from around the world. We can't. And even he's not looking good these days, so got to talk to my buddy. I love it. This is your leucine, essential amino acid leucine. See, it's right there on the top right. Glutamine, glucose, they go right through the cells. What's going to make you flabby and fat versus build nutrients into bone? Right there. Leucine. You make your own RNA, you make your own fire trucks, your X chromosomes send the fire trucks to the fire. Ed also made it, we also made it Global Healing as a group effort. Oral IV line, oral IV vitamin C, oral IV form of amygdalin, and I'm not going to call it Laetrile or B17 because you're going to miss the key, which is amygdalin. These are all the forms of vitamin C, and they're brilliant there at Global Healing. Love Lenny and the mTOR pathway, the mammalian target of rapamycin. It's not the mechanistic target, it's not anything else. And rapamycin is only sirolimus in a pill form. Everything else is a fermentation product. You're literally going to have the rapamycin in the soil once the soil is healthy, which is where we got it before, just like DMG and those other peptides. So, mammalian target, everolimus. Another thing Peter McCullough tried to kill somebody with is the prescription drug. Oh, I'm sorry, he did. He gave it to a healthy autistic kid. What are you thinking? If you don't know what SCN4A and 5A are, probably let somebody else play in that sandbox who does. And TET2, vitamin C. Vitamin C is feeding your DNA methyltransferase. There's your bone cancers, there's your leukemias, there's your lymphoma. So that oral IV line, we cannot stick a needle in it or you will always wound heal. Right there, we can stop the development of all cancers and this is prevention. This is what they asked for. Last week in the hearings. Oops, I'm sorry. Well, I'll just go back and just start it over. I'm so bad at these things. I used to have Benoit, but I couldn't afford him anymore. Okay. Back up from there. Just be really quickly here to just tell you, because we only have a few minutes left, that here is the pathways. So tumorigenesis, we're going to pathways in a system biology approach. We have pathways of protection. By the way, those X's were what we drew for DARPA in April 2006. I drew those things, and if you don't think that hurts when they stole it and they made all that data go away, or at least they thought they did, and you see everything. These are just zillion-dollar drug targets that we just heard Tom Renz talk about, and at the molecular level, you see we can fix every bit of this. And ivermectin isn't a dewormer. It's a purinergic modulator as well as it regulates your microglia. So the most important of the anti-stats from my point of view that we just made, sorry, the clicker's not working, is oncogenics. And this is the 2020, I see it, this is the 2025 version. With all the best of technology, and I mean, we saw people go PET scan negative almost overnight. Right now, we can't get a critical component clean because they're weaponizing everything. But their Paximune, the Nation of Islam, Dr. Ali Muhammad, 50 years ago, Paximune's the only true immunization, and the FDA put bovine proteins on it. When they almost killed my dad, he's like, should I take the bovine protein? I'm like, Dad, and that's when I get to where I'm going after them, because they're killing our family. There's the crosstalk at the bottom from the cannabinoid system to the purinergic modulators. So now we can do this. We have hops extracts. We also have this fabulous hops extract called Fix. You can buy that as a dietary. That'll get you sober, very clean. Just drop it in any drink and you're in great shape. So I'll skip some of the more mechanistics here on the interest of time and just show you here's what you want to do. So what we have now, here's your solution. I've got the cards here. We the people, so they have a big problem. And we, the people, have an offer they can't refuse. And here's what we're going to do. Everybody's going to get these CDC, WHO, international travel certificates. And you're going to go to, I don't know where you're going to go, to Uganda or somewhere on a mission trip, but you're going to need a yellow fever vaccine. And this piece of paper, take a picture of it and order them. They're $1 a piece. So this piece of paper tells you if you're in the U.S., you might want to get measles. So what do I write on the back of that card? I write measles, COVID, influenza. So what that says is here's other things that weren't required for your trip, but you're immunized. Everybody in your church, we're going around, me and Pastor Rob McCoy, he doesn't know it yet, are going around to churches and we're holding immunization clinics. The great Dr. Jeff Barkey and last week and Billy DeMoss, original in NHF. So we're the Light Dove Ministries Medical Education Group. I will send you a stamp when you qualify. Consider yourself educated. And the other fraud that we're working on with Reset Eating, with Robert Kirk, with Jonathan Emord, who's beat the FDA many, many times. It's not ethanol, folks. You don't spell it with an A. It's acetaldehyde. So why is everybody getting fat and dying of liver disease if you're drinking Miller Lite? Thank God nobody drinks Bud Light anymore, or Michelob Ultra. Because it's acetaldehyde, it's not ethanol, it's not alcohol. So learn to use your words, and we can give you COVID shots like this too and guarantee you to heal. But the FDA has already taken out these important components, and we will make anistats, and they will pay for it using microsomal processing. Then we don't have to repurpose drugs at all. Then all we have to do is use them the way they intended. They're dirt cheap. We've healed a lot of people with Truvada, Celebrex, chlorine dioxide, homeopathy, you see, and of course Paximune. Heroes, that's that little boy you saw so injured in the beginning. We can restore. Our faith isn't in science. Our faith is in the promise of science and godly people like our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, to do that, and the ones who participated here. Grateful to you. I handed General Flynn and the 2 Trump sons literally almost a decade ago this slide, and I crossed it out and said now 45 years, but now is the last time we have a chance to do with it. Everybody go out, get immunized, and then the CDC director will see if the new CDC director has repented. Thank you very much. Questions or no time? I will give everybody this on a hard drive tomorrow. Just bring, if you've got an iPhone, I'll airdrop it. I've got a drive. If you have a drive with an adapter, I'll give you 10 talks. I'll give you my entire computer. By the way, I handed Frank Rossetti's 2 computers, my entire computer, everything you see on my hard drive on February 9th to General Flynn for President Trump and to Bobby Kennedy directly. These guys got the data and they want to help you. All you need to do is help. They got all the nukes. Let's get everybody immunized, and then we'll never see another measles outbreak, because that's where they're going.
We can take some questions.
Okay, anybody with a question, burning question? Yes, ma'am.
On the thing you said about nanokinase and microphone, I know he's really into epidemiology.
I can't quite hear you. You said the thing I said about nanokinase and... Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to keep up with your brain. So can you just explain a little bit?
He beat it into me. Whoa, he's a tough cookie.
Because Peter's very into epidemiology and studying.
He's not a scientist. He is not a scientist.
Can you expand on that nanokinase?
Nanokinase is not nano, and it's not a kinase. The paper was published in Japan in 1980. It's the fermentation of a very specific and a bacterial, whatever, mix of slime that grows on a very specific kind of natto, kind of soybean. You won't get that in this country. The soybeans are all modified. And a kinase puts a phosphate group on something. Oh, glyphosate. When you put a phosphate group on glycine, then you don't have dimethylglycine and you've got nothing but poison. So he doesn't have the slightest idea what he's talking about, and he won't go over the papers with me or anybody else. He's not a scientist. And he's not a cardiologist if he doesn't know what Brilinta or purinergic modulators are either. So basically, he lied to Congress when he called himself a chief scientific officer. He came up here and lied to you. He's some kind of expert on spike proteins? No, he's being paid to con you. So I'm sorry, it's not nano and it's not a kinase, it's a deadly serine protease. You will never make glutathione again. That's why you need Proimmune and the rest of this.
One other quick question. Albumin, immunoglobulin therapy, avoid everything injectable, yes?
Yes, IG. In fact, on the back of this card, I have one of these cards in my pocket, and I left several of them on the table. One of them said the other therapies you might want to be on is IVIG. Please don't ever, 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 ever. Eventually, you will attack because it's not you. It's pooled human serum. And we did this all the way back in 2006 when I co-founded the Neuroimmune Institute, and we were using those pooled, they wouldn't let us use them then, and we used something called Ampligen. We can amplify these things with pills. We used them and we could tell by the lots. One lot would almost kill somebody and one lot would be protective. Any normal pooled human serum in this country? I don't think so. Did that catch your answers pretty clear? I'll show you the nattokinase paper. I'll download that for you too. It's called Fire Dancers and Firestorms. I tried to teach it for the better part of a year. Nobody would take it on except Michael Karlfeldt. Thank you, Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. And we actually taught it because I'm somebody who will listen. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see. Mike, I might need your help with the next slide set, wherever you be. Mike? Yeah, thank you. Well, while he's doing that, and we get the proper slides up, is that enough of a dimming of the light? Okay. I have the honor to introduce Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who really needs no introduction whatsoever, but I'll make a pitiful attempt to do justice to this man who suffered from questioning the MMR narrative and was, well, let me just say, Britain's loss is America's gain. And so he's been here a long time, produced films. He's a filmmaker as well as a doctor, and has spoken extensively. And in fact, the first time I met Andy was in Ireland, was in Dublin, because we were there in 2009, both of us, to give a speech through NHF Ireland. And I remember, and it was probably the same experience for Andy, being met at the airport by a black limousine and a gang of guys who looked like, you know, rejects from the Blues Brothers movie. You know, they wore all black and they had dark glasses on. Either that or they were IRA. I wasn't sure if I'd survived the trip, but I did. But the point of the whole thing was, for I don't know how many days it was, but Andy and I gave speeches in Dundalk, in Dublin, in Cork, and we were driven in that black limo to and from the speeches. I was the warm-up crowd, you know, speaker. I would get it all prepared for Andy, but Andy was the real speaker, and that's who they were there to hear, was Andy. Andy, do you mind coming up here and giving your speech? I can't say more good things about you. I'd like to present an award to Dr. Andrew Wakefield for his service to humanity, for the betterment of all. And thank you, Andy, for all your work.
Let's go, Andy.
Scott, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's the end of the afternoon. I'm going to wake you up. You're going to take me through this lecture and answer some questions. If you don't answer them, I will pick someone out of the audience to answer them first. I usually go for the pretty girls first, so watch that. Here we go. Heresy and Health Freedom, 35 years in the trenches. The last time I gave this talk was about a week ago. It was 30 years. It's gone to 35 years in a very short space of time. It feels like that. In fact, it's 36 years. And it started with this disease. I was a gastroenterologist working on inflammatory bowel disease. That was my big interest. And this is the endoscopic image of Crohn's disease. A fascinating, somewhat enigmatic disease, topic of huge research interest, for which the cause is simply unknown. In fact, there's very little emphasis on looking for cause, because why? Because the pharmaceutical industry really have no interest in funding research that finds a cause. They're interested in mechanism of inflammation because that is treatable. Now that's a laudable goal and has dramatically changed the treatment profile of patients with Crohn's disease. As a surgeon, when I trained as a surgeon, then surgery for this disease was very, very common, for strictures, for perforations, for fistulae. And that has changed somewhat dramatically. However, we are no closer to finding the cause of this disease. And woe betide you if you look. My first hypothesis, when I came back from doing a period of research on the vasculature, interestingly, on the blood vessels, the microvasculature. When I came back from Canada to the Royal Free Hospital, I put forward the idea that Crohn's was not in fact a disease of the intestine after all. And that's not a very promising start to an academic career. And that's going to offend a lot of people. But I suggested perhaps that it was rather a disease of the microvasculature of the intestine, and I'll explain to you why that is so important. First thing we did is we put together a protocol that examined the microvasculature of the intestine. Now this is an image from Gray's Anatomy that every medical student at least used to own. And this is vascular imaging. And what you do here is you inject a dye, a resin, into the blood vessels that sets, and then you clear the tissues in methyl salicylate. So the tissues are still there, but you've rendered them transparent. And what you can see now is the normal vasculature of the terminal ileum. That is what it should look like. This is what it looks like in Crohn's disease. This is fascinating. This demarcates the characteristic skip lesions of Crohn's disease. They are discontinuous. They are areas of inflammation, gross inflammation, interspersed with absolute normality. How can that happen? If the prevailing hypothesis for this disease is that there is a breakdown in immunological tolerance between the immune system in the lining of the gut and the gut bacteria, such that it creates and perpetuates chronic inflammation, how can you have one area that's severely diseased and right next to it an area that's absolutely normal? The body doesn't work like that. And when you look at this under the scanning electron microscope, you see these blood vessels now coming into the bowel wall are blocked off. They're narrow or blocked. It had never been seen in this way. Now, this could all be secondary. You could say this is just secondary to inflammation. But what if it's not? And when I would sit down and present this to, for example, the professor of medicine at the Royal Free and his team, they would say, look, this is all secondary. Have you not considered that possibility? Yes, I have. And you're right, there's a 95%, maybe even a 99% chance that it is secondary, that something in the gut is initiating this reaction in the blood vessels. So why look there any further? But what about that 1%? What if it's true? We're going nowhere with this condition. It is an epidemic in young people. When I was at medical school, 30 was the peak age of onset. Now we're seeing it in children of 18 months old. Crohn's disease is one of the most terrible conditions from which a person can suffer. What if there's a 1% chance that this is right? We should not be frightened of being wrong. I mean, science has been wrong far more times than it's been right. Medicine, the same. So we should pursue this nonetheless. And when we then do this is a very subtle technique, akin to molecular biology. You freeze the tissues as you take them from the patient, you freeze them in liquid nitrogen, and you hit them with a hammer. It doesn't get more sophisticated than this. And then you scan the plane of cleavage with the scanning electron microscope. And there, causing those narrowings in the blood vessels, there is a single blood vessel, is this lesion. Sitting there like a big blood clot. It's not what it is. Sitting there growing in the blood vessel and blocking it off, causing ischemia to the downstream lining of the intestine and ulceration. It breaks down. What is that lesion? And then when we put this, what we do now, we go into the operating theatre and the surgeon hands us the piece of resected intestine, put a cannula into the artery and perfuse it with fixative at mean arterial blood pressure. So this now dilates the blood vessels to give them the appearance they would have in real life. Usually you just take it, throw it into a bucket, all the blood vessels collapse, and so you don't see the relationship of the blood vessels to anything. But when you dilate them, you can see in this image of the lining of the bowel under the microscope, you see these areas within the blood vessels of inflammation. And these are the characteristic lesions of Crohn's disease, the granuloma. What is the granuloma? It's an aggregate of activated macrophages. What does that mean? It is a localizing reaction to persistent antigen. If you have tuberculosis, where you see these lesions, granulomas, it is a localizing reaction to the bacillus. So, the importance of this, you know where this is going, is it changes the emphasis. You are now looking for a cause, not coming from the lumen of the bowel through the lining, but in the blood vessels themselves. When you look in the blood vessel, now you ask the question, okay, this changes everything, because the kind of microbes, infectious agents that might get across the intestine,